I would much rather be the worst 7-4 team than be the best 4-7 team in the NFL. I'll explain that as it pertains to the Jaguars here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. We appreciate you making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Shout out to the everydayers that join us each and every day. We appreciate you, and we do not take your presence for granted. And if you're new here, we'll give you a reason to come back. Just make sure you tap in wherever you're watching or listening right now all the time so you do not miss an episode of the show like the one today that is sponsored and brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, I'm going to tell you where we're going, man. I know everybody had their cardio. Nobody went to the gym today because everybody got their cardio yesterday from running around their living room. The Jaguars are getting help in crunch time. They got some yesterday, and they're probably going to get some back here real soon. We'll talk about that to give you a reason to think that there's some blue sky. You can't hide who you need. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Number 16, I see a lot of people saying that what they would do, can't run from that smoke. He has to play or he has to not play better. All right, and are you entertained yet? That's where we're going right here at the top of this show. Because the one thing about this team, while it depends on how you watch football or watch sports, they do not make it something that is mild on the eye. If you love excitement and you don't mind that 7 out of the 11 times that excitement happens that you're going to be victorious, then this is the club for you. If you like boring football, this definitely is not the club for you. If you're looking at the games to poke holes into the Jaguars because you don't like their selections and the moves that they made and the people that they hired, well, this is the place for you because you're going to have a litany of things each and every week, it seems like, to point at. But the bottom line is it's about winning. And they're 7-4. It is hard to win in the National Football League. It's hard to win each and every week. It does not matter who you play. The Giants went to overtime yesterday with the Detroit Lions. The Tennessee Titans they pushed the Chicago Bears, who are 8-3. They pushed the Bears to a walk-off field goal just a week ago. So we need to be wary of them as we come up this week. And it'll prepare you because I told y'all on the crossover with Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals, I said, listen, as long as they get on the plane with a win, I don't care. But I do get why y'all have anxiety. I do get why. If look, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend. I absolutely understand why y'all are saying the things that you're saying. I get it. I'd be a fool to sit up here after being a grief counselor for years on this post-game show and others when I was on the radio station. I'd be a fool to sit here and say, oh, man, it's much ado about nothing. Oh, no, the hell it is not much ado about nothing. Y'all got every right to feel the way that you feel about this team because you know there is a day that's coming. So in the honor of Thanksgiving, I'm going to explain to you exactly in a synopsis of what this is. I'm going to give you a little bit of, like people say, I'm the king of the analogies, right? All right. When it's time to eat Thanksgiving food, I want my aunties, they walk on the back of their house shoes and wear that sundress. And they got an apron on. The apron has seasoning in it. Okay. I don't know where to get it from. I want my aunties, the elbows are a little stocky. Sorry about that, auntie, but it's the truth. All right. Because I think there's seasoning in there too. I want that food to be right. And fortunately for me, years ago, I had a culinary expert called my grandmother to teach me how to cook. So I'm a part of that cooking process. I got the turkey. All right. Here's what we don't want on Thanksgiving. You don't want the experimental cooks. You have to have a track record of being in that kitchen in the middle of the night from years past. You probably start out cutting vegetables. But on Thanksgiving, the food has to work. What the Jaguars do is they give you a meal that turns out to be pretty good every Sunday, but you know they screwed that recipe up along the way, and they just fixed it and kept tasting it the whole way, and it turned out right. And then they doubt it, but they were looking around at everybody and is it good? Is it good? Yeah, well, yeah, man, you did it. But people don't really know because they weren't watching that you screwed up several times, except some people do watch. And y'all are the fans. Y'all did watch. Y'all watch the Jaguars every week screw this meal up. They literally do each and everything that you're not supposed to do for the nourishment of these fans in this city. But somehow, 7 out of 11 times, your belly has been full. And you got the job done, and you got enough leftovers. At some point, y'all know. And this is why you have the anxiety you have. And I know I just went around the mulberry bush like I always do. But at some point, y'all know that experiment ain't going to work. You need those real cooks in there. You need everything to go right when you're cooking those recipes. You need all your pots. You need the timing. You need the seasoning. You ain't going to have a chance to tell somebody to go run to the store and grab an ingredient because all the stores are going to be closed. You know there is a day like Thanksgiving that's coming to where the team that is going to be on the other side of trying to stop the Jacksonville Jaguars from living their dreams, you know they're not going to let them get away with some of this stuff. And that is what's bothering you, because most of the things that they're getting away with are self-inflicted. It's not necessarily because the only team that actually went out and actually whooped them on the field is the team that happens to be the best team in football right now, and that's the LA Rams. The second game where they kind of looked a little bit outmanned was the team that a lot of people believe is the second or third best team in the NFL, and that is the Seattle Seahawks, and that caught everybody by surprise. But other than that, the Jaguars have played teams. They should have beat Houston and they should have beat Cincinnati. They would literally be sitting there at 9-2 had they not lost those two games that were absolutely winnable. This is the point. The point is you know where they're trying to go and where they're going to go. There ain't going to be a whole bunch of teams in there that you can make these kind of mistakes against and win. Now, I know a lot was made. If you follow social media, I told Alex Clancy when Trevor Lawrence turned the ball over, the Jaguars don't win. And I really meant multiple turnovers. I don't mean a play here or a play there where something happens. I mean consistently turning the ball over. And normally that's true for everybody. They won the game yesterday and he turned it over 4 times. And they've won a bunch of games this year. I think they won now 6 of their 7 wins. He's turned the ball over. But that's not what I was talking about. What I'm talking about is when he turns the ball over repeatedly, because this is the first game where he had multiple turnovers where they actually won. This does not mean that turnovers aren't bad, because peacocking about that is like saying, well, we win every time he turns it over, so let him turn it over and we'll win. And that's about as dumb as I can think of anybody even bringing something like that up. But they have to use so much energy and so many other things have to go right for them to win when they mess up that way, right? And this team isn't necessarily built that way, but there are reinforcements coming. You got one of them back yesterday in Brenton Strange, and there's a short-term reinforcement and long-term reinforcement. I'm going to get into both of those. But first, I'm going to tap into this. You got to know who your quarterback is thing, because a lot of that is going on right now, and I get that argument too. So I'm going to make a pro and con argument for that, and I'm going to do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best time for sports, bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Hey, man, look, Trevor Lawrence did his thing yesterday, Jack. I hope you went less on touchdowns and more on interceptions because you got your money, but at least the Jaguars were able to win. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It is good to be right. All right, we moving and grooving here on Locked On NFL, Locked On Jaguars, on Locked On NFL, by the way. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network. Talking about the Jaguars, talking about Trevor Lawrence, and I know he gave everybody a conniption yesterday. I actually had to stop talking about it because after the first pass where it was a tip ball, I corrected myself and said, okay, it was a tip ball. I thought it was bad ball placement. I had everybody, their mama and their auntie hit me up and say tip ball, narrative chaser, tip ball, tip ball, tip ball. And I said, it's not a narrative. I didn't know the ball was tipped. It's just, he has a propensity to have things like this happen whenever he's sometimes in scoring range, right? I think it's a little bit of the staring at the receivers type thing too, because that hurt him with a couple of those late picks. This is already after Trevor Lawrence had probably held on to the ball a little bit longer. I've heard multiple people say he probably should get rid of the ball. He has to have the awareness and know where he is on the blitzes. When he had, I don't know if they considered it a fumble or an INT where the ball got hit and Walter Nolan got it and ran back in the end zone for a touchdown. So technically, the Jaguars only gave up 2 touchdowns. They gave up 17 points because 7 of the points that Arizona scored were on that turnover. So, which is the second type of turnover they've had like that in 3 weeks. So that has to get cleaned up. And I can't believe I just said cleaned up because that's the coach phrase of the day in these interviews. But nonetheless, you got the full Trevor Lawrence experience yesterday because even after he had some questionable passes get picked off, he was able to muster up all the talent in the world and make a couple of nasty throws, man. One to, I believe, Jacoby Myers, and the other one to, one to Parker Washington and one to Brenton Strange. Welcome back, Brenton Strange. We'll get to you in just a second. And then you saw that talent. You absolutely saw the talent. And probably would have scored a touchdown on another pass had Tim Patrick turned around and this thing could have looked even a little bit more in his favor. There's a lot of talk saying, I even said it, when you get to the goal line, man, just run it. Just run it. And that's conceding. And that's what I don't want to do. Because as critical as I've been of Trevor at times, to the point where I've argued with those people, there's a certain small group of people that if you say anything about Trevor Lawrence, you're going to get an argument. You could say his hair looks a little darker than it looked when he first got here, and they're going to bow up and argue with you about it because that's just who they are, and God bless them. That's their right to do that. But I sat in silence yesterday. I didn't say one word about those last 2 picks on social media because it just provides a certain energy that I don't want. And what we do on this podcast is we're super, super honest. Even the most diehard Trevor fans have said stuff like, you got to know who your quarterback is, man, and you can't do that. When you get to the goal line, just try to run the ball. You can't trust him because he's so up and down. Like I said, it's not that he can't play. It's just that he can play, but you're not allowed to hone in on just his ability to can play because he also can screw up at certain stretches of the game that will make your head spin, all right? And that's the disconnect between the people who pull for Trevor without objectivity and the other people. It's just folks don't realize that you're not saying he stinks. They don't. What they're saying is there's an element to being a great player where consistency comes with it. They always love to point to the receivers, always love to point to drops, always love to point to offensive line. Yep, we ain't talking about that because Buffalo has that same problem, at least one of them. And then there are other quarterbacks with the same problem, right? Jacoby Brissett played yesterday with a line that people consider worse than the ones the Jacksonville Jaguars have. So we're not talking about that. You know, you can get. I learned this in Sunday school a long time ago. There's sins of commission and sins of omission. Commission are the ones that you do that you shouldn't do. Omission are the things that you should be doing that you're not doing. Like if a dude doesn't get up and go to work every day to make money for his family. Yeah, you ain't doing nothing wrong. You just ain't doing the right thing, which means you're doing the wrong thing. So this is where the thing with Trevor can be great, but then Trevor can be not great. Here's what I don't want Liam Cohen to do. Don't take your foot off the gas. Do not try to duck that smoke. Just because you got a guy, and I know people saying, man, you just got to win games and try to make the playoffs. I get it. But you are also in your first year, and you are searching and scratching for an identity. And you know what it is? The identity is if you have expectations of X player or player X, regardless of where he's drafted or how much money he makes, and if he is making that money and he was drafted high and this team does depend on him, and that's how you know how to win, you can only simplify this thing and dummy this thing down, but so much until at some point you're going to play. That Thanksgiving Day is going to come. That what I mentioned earlier, where you are going to have to depend on him to do his job at a level and at a consistency that can show you whether or not you can win with him or not. Now, it doesn't mean you need to quit on him if he fails. You can keep going. And because people actually do get better with time. We saw Chris Chandler get drafted in the first round, and he was 10, 12 years in his career, and he ended up going to the Super Bowl. We saw Rich Gannon be a backup his entire career, and at the end of his career was an MVP-type candidate with the Raiders. So we saw Brad Johnson bounce around and then take his team and win a Super Bowl. So the thing is, and I know those dudes don't have the same expectations that Trevor Lawrence had coming out of college, and that's fine. But I say whatever you need to continue, whatever you think you have to do in order to both put your imprint on the team, win, and then hold players accountable for just basic things, you can't cut it back. You might be able to run it a little bit more. You might be able to put guys in better positions. But at some point, your quarterback has to be the quarterback. That just comes with the territory. There ain't no – I would love to go to one of these Marine units and say, you can't let your recon man go out there, man. It's too dangerous. That's what he's supposed to do. He's a recon guy. I mean, I just don't know at what point can you pull this thing back enough to and it starts to look like you're not being aggressive because you're playing with scared money. And this is to the people that think that you can't ever criticize Trevor. I'm actually taking up for him here. And I've been trying to tell people, don't pull that curtain back, because when somebody's being honest about Trevor and you really want to pull that curtain back, do you know what's on the other side? What's on the other side is a whole bunch of people that absolutely do not believe in him and believe that you need to tiptoe around him. So when you're covering this team, you come to find out that there are people who I don't agree with that thinks he stinks, or that you have to tiptoe around him too much. And then there's a whole another group of people that think he ain't tiptoeing around him. The people around him need to be better, and the line needs to be better, and the play calls need to be better, and guys need to catch the ball, and we need to just stop talking about this. It will pop your head if you sit there and listen to all of that stuff. It's almost like being in one of those machines where somebody's grinding from both sides, a vice, and it's just pushing and pushing and pushing, and all you're trying to do is make sense out of it. So what I do believe is this: he has some limitations, and it's not physical. And on the flip side of it is, you're going to have to just play through it, but you can't play around it, because he has to either show you he can do it or show you he can't. And this is the thing about pressure. Sometimes he can't do routine things in games like this, but you put him in a bigger game, maybe he steps up. Maybe he's just that kind of guy. I have no clue, but I can tell you this. I don't want Liam Cohen to take his foot off the gas, and I don't want Liam Cohen to try to game plan around Trevor's weaknesses. I want him to plow right through that stuff and keep going and trust that his quarterback is going to get the right thing done. And if he doesn't, then we'll come on here and tell you he didn't do it. I don't care if it angers you or not. All right, here. How did they get help? Got some help from Brenton Strange yesterday. Could there be other reinforcements for this team coming? I think so. We'll discuss it here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by GameTime. Man, I hope y'all went to GameTime and got you some of those tickets when you were in Glendale, because you got them at a good price. I can tell you that. You know, NFL is all the way back and live when it's the stretch run, and there's nothing like being in the stadium surrounded by fans that cheer your team on. But let's be honest, with checking out and queues and login screens and prices jumping around, it can be disheartening, man, sometimes with some of these places, but not GameTime. Because I pulled up on GameTime, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. And I'm talking about your favorite NFL games as low as $100. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKED. NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. All right, we rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. Brenton Strange came back like gangbusters yesterday. Had over 90 receiving yards, blocking, outrunning people. He's special, man. Shout out to Trent Baalke for taking Brenton Strange, and I criticized him and killed him for doing it. But it turns out that Brenton Strange, one of the 10 best players on this team, and he is very much needed with Trevor Lawrence. He knows how to get open. He finds those spots. Brenton Strange needs to be a Jacksonville Jaguar for a very, very long time. I told you Baalke wasn't all bad. I told you he was cherry. If you look at it from a team building cherry picking standpoint, yeah, but not from a team building standpoint. No, I didn't think he was good. But this cherry picking players and figuring out who can play based on certain traits, he does that pretty good. He picked Parker Washington too. Sure did. He absolutely did. So shout out to him. There's some help coming though. You got that boost from Brenton Strange. I don't think they win the game yesterday without Brenton. And they may have some games on their schedule that they can't win without Jordan Lewis, who is going to come back. By the way, Jaron Jones played a very good game yesterday. Well, Chris Braswell probably needs to have a little talking to, but Jaron Jones played well. They get Jordan Lewis, if he comes back next week or the week after it gets ready for the playoff run, it's going to give a tremendous boost to their ability to make plays and diagnose things so they can shut down things in the passing game a little bit. Trayvon Walker at some point will come back again. I think he got a little bit of a banged up knee right now, but set out just for precaution, I think. And he's going to be able to make it back. And by then his hand will be better. So combined with Josh's play as of late, along with what you're getting from BJ Green and Strigo, I'm telling you, man, they finally, when people were saying, go make a trade, well, maybe they finally just had to rely on some of their young guys, and those young guys got developed a little bit, and they're panning out. So they're helping this team. So, and you need that. Devin Lloyd came back. It looks like yesterday was the first day where it says, okay, it looked like Devin Lloyd's playing like the Devin Lloyd he was the first month of the year, right? Devon Hamilton had a decent game yesterday, along with Eric Armstead. So I think they're going to start getting more and more healthy on offense. Walker Little went down yesterday, came back into the game. They did lose Chuma Edoga, but I think they're going to get Anton Harrison back here pretty soon. And then the wild card in this whole thing is BT, Brian Thomas Jr., if he comes back. So if he can make it back by the end of the year and play anywhere close to what we expected of Brian Thomas Jr., and sometimes by sitting back and watching this, you'll get to see it a little bit better, and that might help him some. So there are pieces and things that you can add. Plus, when you look at all of the young guys the Jaguars have, they're actually improving. They're actually improving. Antonio Johnson played really, really well. So they're getting some production. I'm concerned about the safety position. So hopefully Eric Murray can make it back off IR and be feeling better to really, really help this team down the stretch and into the playoffs, because they need some fortification there. Um, next year, and I know it's hard to look beyond because there's so much stuff that this team is trying to accomplish right now. But imagine how they're playing right now. See, this team had to get used to their coach, get used to their staff, incorporate Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball with that experiment. There was a lot going on. And they put it on themselves. So, ain't nobody claiming to be a victim here, but they put it on themselves. But now you kind of see what this team is without Travis. And you're now going to add him, and he's like the best athlete on this team when healthy. You're now you get, instead of this transformation happening all at once, now you get the chance, unfortunately, to see it independently. Okay, you see the program and you see the proof of concept. Now we're adding Travis, as opposed to those things going down simultaneously. And then throw in Caleb Ransaw, who we have high expectations of as, the day 3 pick. If he's anything like Rayon Lane, who was a day 3 pick, and Ransaw was taken way ahead, if he can get healthy, now you can see where the help and the talent come from. And then you still have an entire offseason of free agency and a whole nother draft with a bunch of draft picks. So I'm not only optimistic about the present, I'm kind of optimistic about the future too, because we can see all of the elements and the coaches and how they instill in these players not to quit. And whatever you say about Trevor, his teammates are still playing for him. They haven't given up on him, because they would have yesterday. They had every reason to do it yesterday, and they didn't. So, like they said, we ain't apologizing for wins, and I wouldn't either. And if I was a fan and I was upset, I wouldn't apologize for being upset. If I'm a fan that's happy, I wouldn't apologize for being happy. If you believe in Trevor, don't apologize for that. And if you don't apologize for that, because that's what makes this all what it is. At the end of the day, what they do on the field is going to be what matters most. What matters most to me is that you enjoy yourself when you spend these 28 minutes with here like you did today. I absolutely appreciate it and don't take it for granted. Locked On Jaguars is your team every day, and we're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is the #1 sports podcast network. Y'all take care. We'll see you next time. Getting ready for Thanksgiving.